At this very moment, when the clock on the wall of the Golden Harvest Studio Pavilion in Hong Kong showed 2:15 in the afternoon, and the calendar was frozen on the date of April 1973, director Robert Clouse felt his heart skip a beat, and it wasn't a figure of speech. He realized that right now, before his very eyes, the film's main star, the man upon whom millions of dollars and Hollywood's reputation were staked, could be killed, or even worse, become a killer. Imagine an atmosphere where the air could be cut with a knife. 40-degree heat multiplied by 100% humidity turned the Enter the Dragon film set into a giant sauna, saturated with the smell of cheap tobacco, prop blood, and real primal testosterone. You think cinema is magic? No. That day it was a war, and the front line was drawn not by a script, but by the nerves of people who had been on the edge of a breakdown for weeks. Around Bruce Lee stood the extras, but you must understand who these people were. They weren't drama school graduates dreaming of an Oscar. They were actual members of the triads, street fighters from the slums of Kowloon, hired for pennies to portray cannon fodder for the hero. They looked at Bruce not with admiration, but with the cold, hungry envy of predators seeing an upstart who had sold the secrets of kung fu to white people and was now basking in the spotlight while they rotted in poverty. Every take, every choreographed strike, Bruce delivered before the camera evoked from them not applause, but a low murmur, like the growl of a pack, a sound more terrifying than any soundtrack. And then, when the director shouted "cut" after another complex scene and the tension should have dissipated, something happened that caused time to stand still. A giant figure separated itself from the dark mass of extras. This wasn't just a stuntman, it was a mountain of a man, weighing nearly 100 kilograms, with a face that bore the biography of hundreds of street fights, and he wasn't heading for the exit. He was walking straight toward Bruce Lee. Do you expect security to intervene? Do you think producers would shield the star with their own bodies? Here, the Santa Barbara effect kicks in, overturning your perception of safety on set. No one moved. Security froze, paralyzed by the audacity of what was happening. Or perhaps they were curious to see how this social experiment, where a small king faces a real threat, would end. The giant approached Bruce, who was wiping sweat from his forehead at that moment, and his shadow covered Lee completely, like a storm cloud. The silence in the pavilion became so dense and vacuum-like that you could hear a fly buzzing near the ceiling and the hum of the red-hot spotlights. The stuntman didn't whisper. He wanted publicity. He wanted a show. He looked down at the man the whole world considered the most dangerous on the planet and loudly, with a mockery that echoed off the walls, uttered the phrase that became the detonator. "You're a fake. You hit for pretend. In a real fight, I'd crush you in a second." Those words hit Bruce harder than any fist. It wasn't just a challenge to a fight. It was an attack on the very essence of his existence, his philosophy, his truth. Do you think Bruce lost his temper? Do you expect him to start screaming, firing the insolent man, or stomping his feet like a temperamental prima donna? No. Bruce did something that makes the blood run cold. He froze. He slowly turned toward the giant, and on his face, there was neither anger nor fear. There was an absolute, terrifying emptiness, the stillness of the eye of a hurricane. But to understand what would happen next, you must pay attention to one detail, that very dagger that most witnesses missed in the chaos of the moment. Look at Bruce Lee's neck. There hangs an ordinary white terry cloth towel. He used to wipe away sweat between takes. It seems like just a rag, a mundane object. But in the context of the impending slaughter, this towel becomes the symbol of his control. Any normal person, before a fight with a giant, would cast off everything extra, freeing the body for maneuver, because the survival instinct demands maximum readiness. But Bruce didn't remove it. He left the towel hanging on his neck. Why? Was it carelessness? Or was it a signal? This piece of white cloth said that for Bruce, the upcoming clash was not a battle for his life, but just another take. the routine work of clearing away trash. The stuntman, seeing that Bruce did not react with aggression, took this calmness for weakness, for the fear of an actor who had been exposed. He smirked, smelling blood, and continued the provocation. "What? Afraid to mess up your face for the cover? Come on, show us your kung fu, or can you only hit people who are paid to fall down?" He was literally begging for punishment, pleading for it without realizing it. He thought he had backed the star into a corner, that Bruce had no way out. If he refused, he was a coward. If he agreed and lost, his legend was over. But Bruce Lee was playing chess while this brute was playing checkers. He slowly nodded, as if agreeing with some internal decision, and gestured for the giant to move to the open space in the center of the set. "All right," he said in a voice devoid of emotion, a quiet but clear voice that cut through the silence of the pavilion. "Let's test it." At that moment, the film crew realized the movie was over. Reality had begun. The camera operators forgot to turn off the equipment, but no one dared to breathe. Do you feel the dissonance? A small man weighing 60 kilograms goes up against a 100-kilogram mountain of muscle and rage without even taking the towel off his neck. It looks like suicide. It looks like madness. The stuntman took his stance, clenching fists like sledgehammers, and in his eyes burned the fire of a killer who had finally caught a chance to enter history. He wasn't planning to spar. He was planning to maim. He was going to destroy the idol. Bruce, however, simply lowered his hands, relaxed his shoulders, and looked at his opponent with the same interest an entomologist has when looking at a bug. An electric charge hung in the air, foretelling a storm. Everyone understood. The next few seconds would determine the fate of the film. If Bruce missed even one blow, production would halt, millions would burn, and the myth of the invincible dragon would be trampled by the dirty boot of a street fighter. But no one, not even the director himself, could have guessed that the climax would arrive faster than anyone could blink, and that this climax would not be a bloodbath, but a lesson in physics and philosophy, taught at the speed of light. The giant took a breath, tensed his muscles, and lunged forward, putting all his mass and all his hatred into one crushing blow meant to take Bruce's head off. But he didn't yet know he was attacking not a man, but a ghost, who had already calculated his trajectory 3 steps before the attack began. Let's be honest, in 1973, Bruce Lee was not yet that untouchable deity from posters in teenagers' bedrooms as we know him today. To most people on that set, he was just an arrogant upstart, a dancer who talked too much about philosophy and weighed too little to pose a real threat. The extras of Enter the Dragon were not professional actors with union cards, but real thugs, members of local triads for whom fighting was not choreography, but a way of survival in the slums of Kowloon. And they looked at this small man in black pants, not with admiration, but with deep, class-based contempt. This stuntman, whose name history has mercifully erased, stepped into the center of the circle, not for sporting interest. He stepped out to perform a public execution, to prove that Hollywood tricks don't work against raw street power, and in his eyes burned the desire not just to win, but to break ribs, to hear the crunch of bones that would forever silence this philosopher. He offered light sparring, but anyone who has ever stood in a ring knows that look. It was a trap disguised as training, an attempt to lull the victim's vigilance before delivering a crippling blow. Do you think Bruce didn't realize this? You're wrong. He read the opponent's intentions before a single muscle flickered on the man's face. But instead of backing away or calling security, he remained standing, terrifyingly relaxed, with that same white towel on his neck, which looked like a hangman's noose. Ask yourself honestly, if a raging brute twice your weight, with fists the size of beer mugs, was charging at you, what would you be thinking at that second? Your instinct would scream, "Run!" Your brain would paint pictures of a hospital ward, and you would instinctively cover your head with your hands, trying to protect the most vital parts. This is a normal human reaction to inevitable pain. But Bruce Lee suppressed that instinct. He switched off fear, like one switches off a light in a room, and transformed into pure reaction, a mirror that reflects the threat without being shattered by it. And then the giant lunges. It wasn't a pretty, cinematic punch with a wind-up for the camera. It was a short, mean, murderous right swing aimed exactly at the jaw, a punch into which he threw all 100 kilograms of his weight and all his accumulated envy. The spectators froze, waiting for the sound of flesh hitting flesh, the sound of a body falling, the end of a legend, because you can't cheat physics, and mass always beats speed. But this is exactly where the Santa Barbara effect occurs, shattering reality and making your brain stall. Do you expect Bruce to put up a block? Do you expect him to take the hit on a hard defense? Nothing of the sort. In the fraction of a second, when the giant's fist should have shattered his face, Bruce simply disappeared. He didn't jump back like a coward, nor did he duck like a boxer. He moved with such unnatural, inhuman speed that a camera operating at 24 frames per second would have captured only a blurred smudge where a man had stood a moment ago. The giant hit the air. He threw all his strength into a void, and the inertia of his own punch dragged him forward, causing him to lose his balance, making him look like a clumsy drunk who had missed the door. This was the moment of truth that took the witness's breath away. Bruce didn't just evade, he annihilated the opponent's attack without even touching him, allowing the giant's aggression to work against itself. Do you think the fight ended there? That the giant would take the hint and stop? Not a chance. The miss only enraged him, turning cold calculation into the blind fury of a berserker, and he, snarling, began to turn for a second attack, not realizing he was already inside a trap from which there was no exit, because he was fighting not a man, but a ghost who was already behind his back, ready to teach a lesson that would hurt more than any fracture. The third second of this confrontation stretched into eternity for the witnesses, becoming that very moment when physics yields to something beyond, for while inertia dragged the stuntman's 100-kilogram body forward into the void where his target had been a moment ago, Bruce Lee was already in another dimension. He was behind his enemy's back. Do you think he struck the back of the head? Do you expect a dirty move worthy of a street fight that would instantly end the match? No. Bruce didn't act as an executioner, but as a surgeon performing open-heart surgery on reality. He made one short, almost invisible leg movement, a sharp, dry thrust under the knee of the giant's supporting leg, a movement so economical that to an observer it seemed like a light touch, but its effect was like the explosion of a skyscraper's foundation. The crash with which the massive body collapsed onto the wooden flooring of the pavilion made the scenery shudder, and the dust rising from the mats danced in the spotlight beams, creating a halo around the fallen titan. At that moment, that very visual silence we spoke of fell upon the film set. 80 extras, camera operators, lighting techs, director Robert Klaus himself, everyone simultaneously stopped breathing, and the silence became so dense, viscous, and heavy that you could hear the hum of the red-hot lamps under the ceiling and the grinding of the stuntman's teeth as he tried to process his fall. He lay on his back, his chest heaving, a mixture of rage and humiliation splashing in his eyes, and he had already begun to prop himself up, clenching his fists, ready to launch one last suicidal attack to wash away the shame with blood. You look at this, and your brain screams, "Finish him!" Because instinct demands a finale, demands a winner standing over the defeated. But here occurs that very Santa Barbara effect that turns the meaning of the scene upside down. Bruce Lee didn't step back to savor his triumph, nor did he wait for the opponent to stand. He dived down after the falling body with such speed that the eye couldn't track his trajectory. His right fist, clenched into a stone, flew straight at the face of the prone giant, aiming for the bridge of the nose, a strike intended to turn the insolent man's face into a bloody pulp, to shatter bones, and forever discourage him from doubting the strength of the little dragon. The stuntman saw this fist, flying at him from the heavens, and primal terror reflected in his eyes. He realized he was about to die, or at the very least, be left disabled. He instinctively squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the explosion of pain that would plunge him into darkness. The spectators in the pavilion winced. Some turned away, unable to watch the execution. But the blow never landed. Instead of the crunch of bones, there was only the sharp whistle of air being cut, like the crack of a whip. Bruce stopped his fist. He froze it in space and time. Open your eyes and look at this picture. Bruce Lee's fist is frozen exactly 1 millimeter from the tip of the stuntman's nose. In 1 damn millimeter. The shockwave, the compressed air pushed ahead by the fist, hit the giant in the face, ruffling his hair, but the skin remained untouched. This was a demonstration of control at a level bordering on divine intervention. To stop the kinetic energy of a blow capable of punching through a brick wall in the final fraction of a second, that was harder than delivering the blow itself. The stuntman opened his eyes. He lay there, staring at the knuckles hanging before his face, like the sword of Damocles, and a bead of cold sweat rolled down his temple. He was alive. He was whole. But inside, he was destroyed, because he realized his life had just been gifted back to him by the man he had called a fake. In that ringing silence, broken only by the heavy breathing of both men, Bruce slowly unclenched his fist. Do you expect him to say something pretentious? To spit in the enemy's face? No. His palm opened, transforming from a weapon into an outstretched hand of help, and that gesture of mercy proved louder than any scream, forcing everyone present to doubt if they understood the nature of power at all. In that ringing, vacuum-like silence that blanketed the Golden Harvest Pavilion, Bruce Lee's hand, outstretched to the defeated giant, seemed not like a gesture of reconciliation, but like something alien, violating the laws of the action genre. For we are used to the winner putting a foot on the loser's chest and letting out a victory cry. The stuntman, still lying on his shoulder blades, looked at that palm with the distrust of a cornered beast, expecting a trick, expecting that at the last moment his arm would be twisted or he would be struck again. But in Bruce's eyes there was neither triumph nor mockery. There was only the calm, almost mundane weariness of a man who had just finished a hard job. Do you think the giant pushed him away? That pride wouldn't let him accept help from the one he called a fake. Here, the Santa Barbara effect breaks the villain stereotype. The stuntman, whose ego had been smeared across the floor along with his sweat, suddenly realized that this outstretched hand was the most terrifying punishment of all, because it transformed him from a martyr into a student. He grabbed Bruce's palm like a drowning man grabs the side of a boat, and Lee, with a jerk demonstrating terrifying strength for his weight, pulled the 100-kilogram man to his feet as if he were made of cardboard. "Good try," Bruce said quietly, his voice devoid of sarcasm. It sounded like a doctor's diagnosis. "But you need to work on your balance. You open up too much when you swing." In that second, the tension that had gripped the film crew snapped, replaced by a collective exhale. But while everyone was looking at the faces of the former enemies, trying to grasp what had happened, you must look lower, at that very detail we mentioned at the beginning, at that very dagger that now, at the scene's finale, begins to shine with the blinding light of truth. Look at Bruce Lee's neck. Remember that same white terry cloth towel he threw over his shoulders before the conflict began. You probably forgot about it in the chaos of the fight, but now, as the dust settles, the realization should hit you like an electric shock. The towel is still there. It didn't fall. It didn't even slip to the side. It hangs exactly as it hung before the giant threw his first punch. Do you understand what this means from the perspective of physics? This is the very intellectual orgasm for which we are deconstructing this story. Any real fight, any brawl is chaos. It is sharp jerks, falls, grapples where clothes are torn, and loose objects fly in all directions. If Bruce Lee had fought in the conventional sense of the word, if he had tensed up, scurried about, or panicked, the towel would have been on the floor in the very first second, but it remained in place. This white spot on his neck is not just fabric. It is physical evidence of absolute inhuman control over space and his own body. It proves that for Bruce, this was not a clash. He moved with such surgical fluidity. His center of gravity was so stable that even the laws of inertia could not dislodge the light fabric from his shoulders. He destroyed an opponent twice his weight without making a single unnecessary movement, without breaking the perfect harmony of his silhouette. It was a visual aid for his philosophy. Be water, my friend. Water flows around the stone. It doesn't argue with it, and therefore it always wins, remaining unchanged. The stuntman standing opposite also noticed the towel. He looked at it, then at his own trembling hands, and in that moment, the world in which strength is measured by the size of a bicep collapsed in his mind. He realized he had lost not to a man, but to an element that is useless to fight with brute force. And then the final transformation of this scene occurred. The hatred in the giant's eyes was replaced not by fear, but by fanatical adoration. He didn't just admit defeat, he found his God. From that day until the very end of filming, this man, who 5 minutes ago wanted to break Bruce's spine, became his shadow, his most loyal bodyguard, ready to rip the throat out of anyone who looked sideways at the little dragon. Bruce Lee didn't just win a fight, he recruited an enemy without spilling a drop of his blood, and he did it without even breaking enough of a sweat to need that very towel, which became the flag of his triumph. The music cuts off abruptly, leaving you alone with a silence that rings in your ears louder than any gong, and the final frame from Enter the Dragon freezes on the screen, where Bruce Lee looks into the distance with the expression of a man who has learned all the secrets of the universe. No, don't rush to turn off the video, because the most important battle is happening right now, not on the screen, but in your head. You have just witnessed a miracle. You saw a man stop time and turn violence into art. But once the euphoria of victory fades, a poisonous worm of doubt, the kind that lives in all of us in the age of the internet and cynicism, will begin to crawl into your mind. We live in a world where it is customary to topple idols, and today many professional MMA fighters, looking at old recordings of Bruce, smirk and say, he was just an actor, a dancer in pretty pants who could never have lasted in a real octagon against a wrestler or a jiu-jitsu practitioner. They claim his speed is a camera trick, and his philosophy is a fortune cookie, and this skepticism begins to corrode the legend like rust corrodes steel. But let's return to that muggy Hong Kong pavilion in 1973 and face the truth using that very dagger, the white towel that never fell from the master's neck. This piece of cloth is the only irrefutable proof that cannot be faked, because the laws of physics don't know how to lie for the sake of PR. If Bruce Lee were just an actor playing the role of a tough guy, his body would have betrayed his fear with microscopic movements, tension, and fuss, and the towel would have ended up on the floor. But it stayed in place. This means Bruce's control was absolute, and those modern critics who call him a fake simply don't understand the difference between a sport with rules and referees and the art of survival, where the only rule is to be water, which takes any shape and crushes any stone. And here the plot takes its final, most provocative turn, the Santa Barbara effect, that forces you to rethink Bruce's own motives. Do you think he stopped the blow a millimeter from the giant's nose solely out of nobility and mercy? You want to believe it was the gesture of a kind teacher sparing a foolish student. But what if it wasn't kindness, but the cold, pragmatic calculation of a businessman who feared losing money? Imagine for a second this cynical version. Bruce realized that if he broke the stuntman's nose, filming would stop. The insurance company would launch an investigation. The press would blow up a scandal about a mad star beating people, and his dream of conquering Hollywood would collapse. Maybe at that moment he wasn't thinking about Taoist philosophy, but about a lawsuit? Maybe his restraint wasn't strength of spirit, but fear of lawyers? This thought is unpleasant. It scratches at the soul, but it makes Bruce's image even more complex and human, turning him from a mythical demigod into a man balancing on a razor's edge between a killer's instinct and a producer's responsibility. However, look at the face of that stuntman who became his shadow until the end of filming. There was no gratitude in his eyes for a saved career. There was a sacred awe before one who could have killed, but chose life. This silent witness, whose name dissolved into history, knew the truth that modern skeptics cannot grasp. Bruce Lee didn't just defeat his body. He broke his spirit by showing that true strength lies not in delivering a blow, but in having the ability to deliver it and choosing to renounce that right. It was a lesson that went far beyond martial arts, becoming a manifesto of humanity in a world obsessed with violence. Now that you see the full picture, from the provocation and the 4 seconds of silence, to the motionless towel and the eternal debates about the reality of his skills, I place before you the scales of history, and you must make the choice that defines your relationship with the legend. On one side of the scale is Bruce Lee as the warrior, possessing supernatural control and power, capable of killing with a glance, but choosing the path of peace. On the other side is Bruce Lee as the genius actor and mystifier, who used psychology and fear to create an illusion of invincibility and stopped the blow only because he feared the consequences for his career. Where is the line between reality and myth? Was this gesture, the frozen hand, a manifestation of divine power, or the greatest acting etude in cinema history? I want you to stop being passive spectators and become judges in this duel of the ages. Go down to the comments right now. Don't write a cliché legend. I want to see your truth, born of doubt. Who was he in those 4 seconds of silence? Warrior or actor? Write one word and explain why, because perhaps it is your answer that will help us understand what real strength is. The ability to break bones, or the ability to manage chaos without spilling a single drop of blood. I will be waiting for your verdict, because the fight isn't over as long as we are arguing about it.